Nikhil, we've of course been seeing our markets outperform. That's despite all of the news that came out of China, which was shut for 2 days. Just day before yesterday, we saw how Wall Street had also fallen quite badly, recovered. Yesterday, you ending along the flat line with a negative bias. Today, China has reopened. You have seen the markets in Asia come under a bit of pressure as well. But the big news being the property behemoth Evergrande, with over $300 billion in debt, looking at a financial crisis, has come out with a statement saying it's going to come good on the 2 bond payments it owes this week. That's a big statement that has come in. The markets are, of course, watching out for that. And Mitul Kotecha, the senior emerging market strategist at TD Securities, joining us live to talk about all of this. Mitul, the last couple of days, we should also remember there's an FOMC meet. We'll see the Fed chairman trying to soothe the markets when it comes to the tapering program. However, the big story is coming from China. The markets have been reacting the last couple of days to this. India's been outperforming. Are the markets now expecting the payments will be made? Is that what we're seeing on our screens indicate?
Well, as you said, there's been the news story this morning that there will be payments made. Now, it is a bit unclear still because the story is referring to onshore bond payments. There is no mention yet of the offshore payments that are due. At the same time, the question is also how much of that will be paid and at what rates, and it's not clear yet. So there's still a little bit of uncertainty around it. I mean, it is good news nonetheless. That there is some at least payment likely tomorrow. But again, as I said, the details still need to be seen to get a proper gauge as to what impact this will have.
So while the markets await that clarity, what we've also seen the last couple of days is clarification coming in from all kind of quarters. The payments will be made. But Mitul, if you just look at the flows, it does seem as if India is getting a premium for not having this kind of problems, for not having the kind of policy uncertainty or laws that are smashing our companies.
That's right. I mean, look, I think India's really benefited from strong inflows into the equity market, and foreign investors seem to have continued to like Indian assets in some way. At a time when there's so many concerns globally, as you mentioned, you've got the Evergrande contagion issues, which have, Evergrande's been a running issue for some time, but the contagion has certainly had a bigger impact globally this week. At the same time, obviously, concerns about Fed tapering and what that means. Weaker growth is also something that is impacting markets, higher inflation risks. COVID risks still remain abound. So the fact that investors still are showing a positive tone towards Indian assets and the Indian rupee as well, and to some extent Indian bonds, is certainly testament to how well, I guess, India's managed to come through to some extent the COVID crisis and managed to deal in some ways with the massive wave that we saw in the past. Growth recovery has been fairly firm. There is still a strong consensus for Indian growth this year, potentially around 9% or so growth is expected. So it all looks positive in that respect. Obviously, there are risks, but for now, investors are starting to at least applaud this outlook.
Sure. Mitul, while it seems like it's well in the price, but do you think there could be something critical from the FOMC meet which concludes today? Because markets are already working with the assumption that, there is going to be taper come November. And then, of course, you've got the BOJ as well meeting today. Could we hear anything from the central banks which could perhaps shake off the markets?
Well, there's a lot of central bank meetings this week. And certainly, as you mentioned, today is obviously going to be the key one with the FOMC. Firstly, from Bank of Japan, we're not looking at any changes in policy or anything significant to come out of the BOJ meeting. But the FOMC is going to be very, very, very interesting. Clearly, we will need to see how close the Fed is to tapering. And as you mentioned, November or December seems likely in terms of the beginning. One thing that will be in focus is the dot plots. It's really the measurement and focus on how Fed FOMC members see the first Fed rate hikes and up to what extent. And there is a risk here of a hawkish shift in the dot plots. It's not our base case, But if we do see a shift towards perhaps earlier tightening, and bear in mind the market's pricing in tightening by around March 2023. If the dot plots show an earlier shift, you could see a hawkish reaction in markets, which may bode well for the dollar and probably less well for bond markets. But certainly that's going to be a key focus in terms of what the Fed tells us today.
Sure. Mitul, great to have you on the show and get in that quick chat. Good to speak with you as always.